Hi, we're going to do a walk around today on a International snowplow without the snowplow and without its side blades. We're going to do an overall CDL vehicle inspection. We're going to start with the front of the truck. We're going to try and do this the way you should be doing this, and you don't have to mimic my way, but you do have to do it the same way every time. First, we're going to start with the front of the truck. We're looking for your lights, your leaks, and your leans. We're going to start with the leaks. We want to look underneath the truck, and we're looking for anything that is leaking that's not supposed to be leaking. Not condensation from the air conditioner, but oil. If it's an automatic transmission fluid, hydraulic fluid, any type of fluid that is not supposed to be leaking. And once we get to the motor section, we open up the hood, we can see if we can find where that leak is coming from before we continue on. Next, we're going to look for leans. We're going to go ahead and look for either to the right side and then to the left side, or the left side to the right side. And you're looking to see if the vehicle is leaning to one side or the other to determine whether or not you have damage to your suspension. We're not talking about parking in a hole and the truck is leaning because it's in a hole. We're talking about actual damage to the suspension, or a flat tire perhaps. Something that is out of the ordinary for that vehicle. And then we're going to move to the lights. Now we're going to start at the top, and in this case we have a rotor beam on the top of the light, and we want to make sure that it's the proper colors. Depending on the vehicle and the year that it was made, it will have either all amber or a purple and amber light bar that's on the top. The air horns, we're going to see that the air horns are properly mounted, that they're secure, they're present. When we get inside the cab and do our in-cab inspection, we're going to make sure that they're working properly. We're checking our mirrors, that they're properly mounted, secure, and present. We're checking our windshield, the front of our windshield, that it's there, there's no major cracks, that it's not missing. We will again check that when we get inside the cab. We're looking for the windshield wipers again, that they're just present. We're looking at our hood, that it's properly mounted and that it's secure. We can see on the side of the hood that the straps to hold it are down, depending on the type of model you have. The latch may be on the inside release or an external release. We're going to move to the front of the truck to where the lights are. We also have, before we go to the lights, we have one more mirror to check. Rather important mirror to keep, make sure that it's properly mounted and secure and present. We have our headlights. We have headlights for the snowplow and turn signals. We have more driving lights and more turn signals and more regular headlights. We want to check your left turn signal, both on the upper end and the lower ones. We want to make sure that the right turn signal is functioning and the four-ways are functioning. They have separate elements in some of the older vehicles, so you could have a turn signal that is working but not a four-way that's working. So you want to check them independently of each other. You have all your lights checked. You're ready to move on to your next section. All right, we're going to go to the side of the vehicle. Again, we're going to start at the top, work our way down, checking our rotor beams. We're checking our air horns, that they're properly mounted and secure. These are external. You might want to get up on the steps and grab them and shake them to make sure that they're properly mounted and secure. Some of the air horns may be mounted underneath the truck, some may be mounted underneath the hood. Depending on where they're at, you want to make sure they're properly mounted and secure. When we get inside the cab, we're going to check that they're working properly. We're going to check our mirrors, that they're properly mounted and secure, that they are not moving excessively and waddle around while you're driving. If that happens, you need to stop and fix them. You need your mirrors, all of your mirrors, not just one. You're checking your lights on the side of the vehicle. Again, your four-ways and your turn signals on the side of the vehicle. You're checking your door. You're going to open your door and you're going to lift and push a little bit on it to make sure that the hinges are proper and working and mounted securely, that the door frame itself is not bent, that the door gasket is all the way around the door and seals the door properly, that it latches and opens properly. You're going to make sure that your hand mounts are mounted securely and not moving. You're going to make sure that your steps on the side of the vehicle are all properly mounted and secure. And in this case, the steps are also mounted to your fuel and your hydraulic. This particular truck has a hydraulic tank here. And again, we're looking for leaks. We would open up our hydraulic cap, make sure that there's a chain mounted to it so that it does not fall off and go down the road and it's just flopping in the wind and picking up debris. We're going to check that our straps are all properly mounted and secure, that there's a rubber gasket that's following around on the straps all the way around to the bottom. While we're on the bottom of the tank, we're going to look for leaks from the fuel tank and from the hydraulic system. We're going to check our fuel tank. Our fuel tank, we're going to check the cap. We're going to take the cap off. We're going to check that that has a proper gasket on it and that it has a chain to hold it again. If it is forgotten, not mounted properly, it could fall off and damage oncoming vehicles. Check our steps again one more time. We're checking for leaks from the fuel tank and from the reservoir of the hydraulics. We're going to the back of the vehicle. We're going to look at the exhaust from this side, and we're also going to look at the exhaust from the other side a little later. We're going to check the frame. We're checking all our hoses and any kind of electrical components that are here. We're making sure that there is nothing leaking from any of the hoses and that everything is properly mounted and secure. We're going to check our air dryers here, and we're going to check the frame as we keep going to the back. We're going to check this front mud flap on there, that it's at least half of the tire. We're going to come back to our tires. We're going to check our tires. We want to make sure that we have 2/30 seconds of tread depth, 4/30 seconds on the front. We want our inflation and our condition and our depth. We want to check the bud spacing in between the tires, that no debris is collected in between the tires. We want to move to our rims. We want to make sure that the rim is properly mounted and secured, that there's no cracks and no unauthorized welds on the rim. We want to make sure that all our lug nuts are present. We want to try and touch each one of them, okay, and make sure that they don't spin in your hand. I'm going to check each nut on the axle. Make sure they're all present, they're all mounted, they're all secure. I'm going to check the paper seal on the inside to make sure that it's there. When you're checking your inflation on your tire, you are going to, for UDOT, 110 PSI. And the only way to check inflation on a tire is with a tire gauge. And we want to check this tire. We want to do the exact same thing. We want to do the inflation, the condition, and the depth. We want to check the bud spacing. We want to do everything that we did to this tire, we want to do to this tire as well. And when we get to the brake system on the inside, we'll take a look at the inside, and we can see the inside of the drum. Make sure that the drum is properly mounted and secure, that there's no cracks or unauthorized welds on the drum, that your brake pad or your shoe is a minimum of 1/4 of an inch, and that it is functioning properly. You're going to take a look at your slack adjuster and your push rod. The two items go together, a slack adjuster and a push rod. And once the brakes are released, you will be able to pull on the slack adjuster, and the push rod will move as well. That push rod cannot move more than 1 inch. If it moves more than 1 inch, when you pull on that released slack adjuster, your brakes are out of adjustment and need to be taken care of. We're going to go ahead and move on to the suspension system here. Now, as you will see in your CDL manual, it'll talk about the leaf springs and the leaf spring mounts. You're going to check that the mounts, all the bolts on the mounts are there, that the leaf springs are all in place and they haven't moved from one side to the other. You have a U-bolt that goes over the springs to make sure that they don't slide. You have to have a minimum of 1/4 of the number of springs. So if you only have 2 springs and you have one broken, you're out of service. So if you have 1/4 is the minimum number you have to have. If you only have 2 springs, you're out of service if one is broken until it is fixed. So the U-bolts, the nuts holding the U-bolts, they're all properly mounted and secure, and they're not moving. And you're checking both sides. Shock absorbers, you're checking that the shock absorber mounts are properly mounted and that they're secure. They're not leaking in any manner, and that they are functioning properly as well. You're going to be checking your lights on the back of the vehicle and your door. You can check that the mounts keep the door closed. the hinges on the door. You have a left turn signal, a right turn signal. You have a backup light, and you have tail lights, and you have a brake light. All of the lights need to be mentioned for both sides of the vehicle. You are also going to check your four-ways, that the four-ways are working. Again, with these particular ones, these are LEDs, so they won't burn out a filament. But if you have a trailer or a tractor that has filament lights, they run off of separate filaments sometimes, and so you could have a four-way that works but not a turn signal that works. So checking your four-ways without checking your turn signals is an insufficient way of doing your pre-trip. When you come to the back of your vehicle, you're going to check that your door is properly mounted and secure, that any ties are there. You're going to check your mud flaps. Okay, your mud flaps have to be at least halfway down the tire, preferably a little bit more, about 10 inches off the ground. You're going to be looking at your license plate light, your license plate. You're going to check your glad hands. And these pivot points that you have right here, you want to make sure that the pivot point on both sides, that they're properly mounted and secure, that they're greased properly. These are your only points other than the ram at the front that's going to hold this bed in place. If these aren't secured properly and aren't mounted right, you can lose your bed. And that would be a terrible thing to happen. You check that your grommets on the inside of your glad hands are over here are proper. They're properly mounted. You want to check that that grommet is in there. And then you're going to move down to your pintle hook. Check all of the nuts and all of the bolts on the pintle hook. And you're going to check your release handles here, and that this pintle hook is all properly mounted and secure on both sides. So don't forget to check your hydraulic system. We'll talk about the hydraulic system at a later date. But you're checking for leaks. Is anything leaking here? If something's leaking at this point, or any of your hydraulic lines, again, anything that's not supposed to be going on is what you're looking for. You're going to look at your drive shaft underneath there. Check all the U-bolts, universal joints in there. And the drive shaft, that it's properly mounted and secure, that it's working. The exhaust system, you're going to follow it from the engine compartment to the back. What you're looking for is at all these clamp spots. You're looking for black soot. Like in this one right here, you can see a little bit of black soot where there's a dent right here. All right, next we're going to move to the engine compartment. The engine compartment is closed. The hood is closed by external latches in some cases. Some cases the latch is on the inside of the compartment like a car. You would see you have a handle that you would pull and it releases just like you would a car. Others are located on the exterior. Sometimes they're down here, sometimes they're up here. You have to find how to open your hood before you open it. Okay, now we're going to move to the left side, the passenger side. All right, so we're going to go to the engine compartment. We're going to start on the passenger side. And we're going to check the alternator. We're going to check that all the wires are connected and that it's properly mounted and secure. We're going to check the belt on the alternator. Now, if you can reach in with your hand and you can find the belt and push in, you want to push the belt. Don't pull on the belt, push on the belt. It shouldn't move much more than a quarter inch. Just push on the belt. Okay. You want to make sure that the alternator is properly mounted and secure. You're going to take a look at your water pump. Your water pump's way in the center of the truck. Okay. You want to make sure that that's not leaking, that it has no gaps in there, and that it's not spewing any fluid dripping from it. You're going to check your oil. This is where your oil goes in. Your oil dipstick on this side, same principle. You twist the handle until it gets loose, and then you pull it out, and you need a rag. You're going to pull it all the way out, clean it, push it back in, pull it back out, and check the oil. Make sure you have sufficient amount of oil. This is for your automatic transmission. It locks up, pull it out. You check that when the engine has been running for a while and it is hot. Don't check it when it's cold. You're going to check your exhaust. This is part of the exhaust system. This is your turbo. Again, you're looking for black soot coming from any areas that it's mounted to. You're going to go up here to your coolant system. This is a coolant reservoir, and in this particular truck there is no external coolant, so the only way to check it is through this sight glass right here. As you may or may not be able to tell, but there is coolant here. So we're going to come from the front of the truck, we're going to open up the hood, and we're going to go from the passenger side to the driver's side. On the driver's side, we're going to start with the frame, and then we're going to move down to the spring mounts. And from the spring mounts, we're going to go to the springs, and then we're going to go from the springs to the U-bolts. Now again, as we talked before about the springs, we want all of the springs to be present. We can't have more than 1/4 of them missing or broken. The U-bolts all have to be secure and properly mounted and secure. And then you go to the back mount and make sure that it's properly mounted and secure. We're going to go to the shock absorber right here and make sure that the shock mounts on the top and the bottom are properly mounted and secure, and that the shock is working. From there, we're going to go to the inside to the motor, and we're going to go to the air compressor, and the air compressor, below the air compressor we're going to go to the power steering, and from the power steering we're going to follow the hoses on around to the gearbox. Okay, and one of the power steering hoses leads to the power steering reservoir, so we want to check the power steering reservoir. We want to make sure, and this one again is just a twist, real simple. You've got to wipe it clean. Once you wipe it clean, dip it back in, pull it back out, and make sure you have enough fluid in your power steering reservoir. Follow the hoses again to the gearbox. The gearbox is properly mounted. Shake it, not going to move. We're going to go to the Pitman arm. We're going to check that the castle nut and the cotter pin is secure on the Pitman arm. Then you're going to go to the drag link, and you're going to follow the drag link on back over to the knuckles and make sure that the cotter pins and the castle nuts are all secure. We're going to come up from there, and we're going to go to the brake canister, the diaphragm where the air from the air hose, which you are going to check that it's properly mounted and secure, and that it's going into the brake chamber. You're checking that the brake chamber is properly mounted and secure. You're checking that this part right here, this is your push rod, this tiny little rod here. Then we're going to move from the push rod and make sure that it's attached to this pin, and it has the cotter pin in place, and it's holding in place, to the slack adjuster. This whole thing right here, this whole device right here is your slack adjuster. Now on the front brakes, you can actually pull this slack adjuster out to check on that 1-inch movement with the brakes engaged, because it does not have, on the brake canister, it does not have that spring brake. You cannot do this with your back brakes because there is a spring brake attachment on there. That spring brake, when it's engaged, will prevent you from moving that. From the slack adjuster, we pull that, we move no more than 1 inch. It does not move more than 1 inch. So we're pulling on that, it moves less than 1 inch. That means that our brakes are in adjustment. We're going to move to the inside, and from the inside we're going to look at the drum. You're looking for the drum. The drum has no cracks or unauthorized welds. That the shoe has a minimum of 1/4 inch depth on the shoe. You would check the seal. Again, you're looking for excess oil here. And that's all you're looking at. All right, so on our tire, we're going to check for ICD, the inflation, the condition, and the depth. We're going to start from the inside and work our way out. We want to make sure that the condition is good on the sidewalls, on the inside sidewalls, and the outside sidewalls. On the depth of the tire is 4/32. There's no bruises, no contusions, no abrasions. We're going to move, and we're going to check that the inflation is up to spec again. UDOT wants 110. We are going to check the rim. Now the rim is in this case happens to be a steel rim, and we're checking for any kind of streaks, for rust. If you see rust streaks, then there is it looks like this at one time had It's been cleaned since then. Loose lug nuts. We are going to move from there. We check that there's no cracks, no welds, unauthorized welds on the rim, that the bead around the tire is good. Each lug nut is properly secure. No rust streaks. Again, if this was an aluminum rim, we would be looking for oxidation streaks. We're going to move from the lug nuts and we're going to check our hub. And in this case, this has a rubber hub right here. We can pop that off, or we can just look at the sight glass. You want to check your oil level. It has a full mark and a low mark. And as long as the oil is there between the two, we are good on the amount of oil that is in there.